White Sox fans, welcome in. Sox on Tap. After dark, coming at you here. Johnny Nani, NWI Steve, rolling late, burning the midnight oil here on Thursday, August 3rd. Steve, welcome back from Hotlanta. How was it seeing a real baseball team in action?
Hey, Johnny. Yeah, back here from sabbatical. Down there in the ATL, getting to see some high-end quality baseball. The Barbs, they like to hit the ball over that fencing. It's a lot of fun, a lot of fireworks there, and came back yesterday and got right back in the mix of just some really shitty, pathetic White Sox baseball.
Yeah, like I was going to say, you didn't miss much. White Sox get swept at the hands of the Rangers. So, honestly, not a whole lot to talk about from that series. Tony and I went deep dive on the trade deadline in our Tuesday show. So, I think I blew all of my hot air. We're going to let Steve get some of his thoughts out there on the trade deadline. We'll get to that and talk about what's going on with the front office because some interesting things going on in that front, too. So, before we do, make sure, as always, you're subscribed on Tap Sportsnet on YouTube. Drop your comments in the section there, and we can feature them on the show. Like us on Facebook as well, and do that. Fortunately, we can't see the Twitter comments. Pull them up here in the show. So go over to YouTube and Facebook if you want to join the discussion. And as always, check out ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. All right, housekeeping's over. Steve, we're talking White Sox. Just, man, I called this episode Drilling Through Rock Bottom here. I know the Texas Rangers are a good team, but it's just disheartening to watch one of the best clubhouse morale guys leave, and then you go out and get shellacked. I think that was a perfect word our guy Sox Insane used to describe it in one of his recaps there. It's tough, man. It's tough to just even bring yourself to tune into these games.
There's just nothing positive right now surrounding this baseball team. You look at the trade deadline, the way it went down. Obviously, a lot of people within the fan base wanted this thing stripped down completely. They wanted Dylan Cease to get moved, just in terms of being able to maximize the possible return for him. I know at the same time, there are people that didn't want the current front office to be the ones to execute that move. And I can certainly understand the position on that. But just looking at this thing realistically, Dylan Cease is not going to be here the next time the Sox have their next fluke playoff season in 2028 or 2029. So the idea of keeping him around right now, it just doesn't really serve much of a purpose from my perspective here. And they just look completely lifeless out there. You got 52 games left to go in the season, and it is really just going to be an epic death march to this point. I know that's a term that I've used a lot over the course of the last year and a half or so, but we're really going to see it happen here right now because there's just very little positive outside of Luis Robert Jr. at this point that you can even point to right now surrounding this team.
Yeah, right. You had brought up the Dylan Cease thing there too, and while you were on the Luis Robert train there, obviously that's the only reason to watch as you kind of outlined there. But Jake Berger was one of the other reasons to watch too. So I wanted to get your thoughts on him, but first, just before that, comment from LA. So I'd much rather you guys have watched the Sox this year. Thank you, we appreciate that. We'll be here for you. So tune back in on Tap Sportsnet on YouTube. Check it out. But as I mentioned there, Steve Berger. Let's get into him. Your thoughts on him. Tony and I kind of gave ours on Tuesday, but you need to air it out here.
Well, look, it's frustrating because I've been saying for a while, I think that Berger is one of only a couple of guys on this team that is really likable. This is just a very unlikable bunch overall because the performance hasn't been there. They're not healthy. They're not on the field. There's no positive energy surrounding this team. But Berger was a guy that was something that you could be positive about. And, the backstory with him overcoming the 2 Achilles injuries that he's had to get to where he's at in the major leagues and being a guy that seems like he genuinely appreciates being in the major leagues every day. And that's such a stark contrast from so many of the guys that are in that clubhouse right now. And we saw a lot of things with him and a lot of people kind of coming into the season saying he's nothing more than a platoon bat against left-handed pitching. He doesn't have a position. So that's all he's going to ever be. He's going to be a guy that's going to DH against left-handed pitching. Well, due to injuries to Yohan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez, he was thrust into a role where he was getting more consistent plate appearances and doing it against right-handed pitching. And there were some struggles, and there were some notable struggles. I think particularly you look at the month of June, it was bad, and that has really weighed down his numbers overall. But all the obstacles that have been placed in front of him to this point, he can only hit left-handed pitching at home. Well, he's overcome that. He's hitting right-handed pitchers on the season to a 101 WRC plus. Okay, so he's a league average against right-handed pitching right now. He's been doing the job on the road. There is still a little bit of a discrepancy in the home road splits, but we've seen incremental improvement with that. People talking about, he doesn't walk, his on base percentage is 279. Jake Berger just had in the month of July a 12.1% walk rate. Anybody want to guess what Andrew Vaughn's walk rate was in the month of July?
Below that, I don't know what it is, but below that,
I'll tell you what it is. 1.5%.
there you go.
So I wrote about this over the winter with Andrew Vaughn in particular needing to be a guy that strings together two complete halves. And we're already starting to see the same thing that we have seen each of the last two seasons, where the second half rolls around and Andrew Vaughn completely disappears. We're now in a spot where it looks like he's going to once again hit maybe 17, 18 home runs with a 420 slugging percentage. And for all of the deficiencies with Jake Berger, with the low on base percentage, he's still slugging 100 points higher than Andrew Vaughn. But I'm supposed to believe that they couldn't find at bats for Jake Berger because Eloy Jimenez is going to be the DH. I mean, there was no reason why Jake Berger couldn't be seeing consistent at bats at first base, because he was actually producing power. Now, I also acknowledge that at this time right now, where this franchise is in their quote unquote competitive cycle, that they need to retool a lot of different things here. And the fact of the matter is, a guy like Andrew Vaughn has no trade value out there. Eloy, you don't really know what the value is going to be because of the inconsistency from a performance standpoint and also from the injury standpoint. So you're in a spot where Jake Berger has a very loud tool in terms of being able to provide power. And that was something that the Miami Marlins desperately needed. So they were willing to meet a particular asking price for him. It sucks to see Berger go. At the same time, you have to acknowledge that, look, there is a possibility that this is 2018 Daniel Palka. It's possible. It can't be ruled out. But for me, looking at it and trying to be as objective about this as I possibly can, seeing the improvements that he has made along the way against right-handed pitching, being able to have quality at bats and producing on the road, seeing the improvement in the walk rate in the month of July. This is a guy that doesn't even have 500 career major league plate appearances under his belt. So I still think that there is more upside in there, and there is still more room for growth with Jake Berger. And unfortunately, now that growth is going to continue down in South Beach.
Yeah, and I think a point that you had made about, when you were just opening up about Dylan Cease and saying that, he's not going to be around for the next time to squeak in your mind in 2029. Okay, you go and look at that very end of that. Jake Berger's control is running up through like that season, right? 2028. So that was a guy that possibly could have been around. And when you talk about the lack of experience overall comparatively to some of these other guys that we kind of know a little bit more about, there's still the chance that he could improve year over year, right? Maybe not the same exact home run totals, but if he works on those other aspects of his game, getting on base more, add in, improved defense. I mean, shit, obviously we know that has not been a strength of his, but the guy's willing to go over to second base. And I know it was very, just a few games before he got shipped out, but it's like that guy was willing to go over there and play second base. And didn't really see too many massive blunders there. Not that he had a whole ton of opportunities, but it's like, not saying he's a second baseman long-term or anything like that, but it's okay. The bat plays enough to where you're even going to make those changes to get him in the lineup. Nobody else is really forcing their way in that light on this White Sox roster.
You're absolutely right. And the thing that, again, I keep coming back to, his slugging percentage starts with the number 5. There's one other guy on the roster that you can say that about. And we've been talking about this going back to last year about this team not hitting for enough power, not hitting enough home runs. So the idea of subtracting one of the guys that was doing that, it's understandable why there is certainly a portion of the fan base that is upset about this move. Um, it's frustrating to see from that aspect of things. But again, trying to acknowledge the fact that there are concerns about the long-term plate approach with this, and is this going to just be a kind of one-off season hot streak? I can understand and I can appreciate the concern with that, having lived through the Daniel Palka experience. But again, next season, this isn't going to be a competitive team next year. So I would be more than happy to have seen the Jake Berger experience and see if there is continued growth with him versus the other guys that are here on this roster right now.
Yeah, right. I think that's a good summation of Jake Berger, the player. Let's talk about one other aspect of that trade, and it was a comment from Miami Marlins general manager Kim Ng on the broadcast. She joined the Bally Sports, Florida broadcast for the first game that Jake Berger was there, and she basically hinted that it was more Kenny Williams doing the discussion there, and Kenny Williams was the one that traded her Jake Berger instead of Rick Hahn. Now, this I didn't see the clip. I saw that it was mentioned on Twitter. So I don't know the exact quote. I couldn't give you a line for line quote of what Kim Ng said. But if that's the case, man, we are dealing with some massive disarray. I mean, we all kind of knew that. Look at the product, look at the morale, listen to the quotes that you hear from these guys. But my God, I didn't realize it was to this point that this is happening on trade deadline day there. What do you make of all of this?
It's fascinating, and it aligns with some things that I've been hearing through the grapevine over the course of the last couple 2-3 weeks, that Kenny has really kind of usurped authority again from Lawyer Boy. And I know there's a segment of the fan base that is very happy about that, but I think at the same time, you're basically going back to a guy that, yes, he was the general manager when this team won the World Series, but he was also the general manager that oversaw a lot of failures for this franchise here. And to see people just kind of celebrating this notion that it was him that pulled the trigger on it and not Rick Hahn, uh, I don't get it. Neither one of these guys deserves any benefit of the doubt at this point here. But it just goes back to something that I've talked about, I think, for a long time here, is everybody in this organization has plausible deniability because you don't know who really does what. So now Rick Hahn can easily just, he can send a text to Jeff Passan and be like, well, that's not really what I wanted to do, but, I didn't really have a say in it. And around we go, because again, there is no clear cut direction in this organization. There is no clear cut delineation of power and responsibility within the front office. So this breeds a lot of the commentary that is pretty frequent on twitter.com, or is it X now? What are we calling it these
Yeah, I
days
don't
here?
know. Is it White Sox X or White Sox
I
Twitter?
yeah, I
Kind of funny that White Sox X plays WSX as a abbreviation there, but sidetrack thought.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it feeds into all the narratives about how dysfunctional and backwards this organization is. And if Kenny Williams is indeed the one that is taking charge of this situation here, a lot of the people that are leading the whole Fire Han brigade, and again, Rick Hahn should not have his job. He shouldn't. But I think a lot of people then need to kind of reevaluate their position on things, if this is back to being a Ken Williams show.
Right. Just a question. We're not flies on the wall there, but in your opinion, when you see things like this continually happen, and this being the most recent occurrence here, does this give you any thought that there may be some shakeup on the horizon this offseason? I know we all know about Jerry Reinsdorf's loyalty and all of that, but I just have to ask the question if this is kind of going to be a thing for one of the um, points of determination for a direction forward. As much as Rakan doesn't want to talk about it right now, seeing stuff like this, it matters. Do you think any possibility of shakeup in the offseason, this leading to a little bit of rift going on within the White Sox brass?
Yeah, I think there definitely is a possibility. And I think if you just kind of try to read the tea leaves of some of Han's comments following the recent trades here, and talking about how and I'm going to paraphrase the quote here, that you'll know more about the direction and the people making those decisions when the time is right. I thought that was a very interesting way that he worded that. And I've kind of gone back and forth on this for a while here, as we've done a lot of shows in recent weeks, and thinking that maybe Han is going to be the fall guy and going to get reassigned to a different position within the organization. And then we're going to get stuck with Chris Getz or Jeremy Haber. And I think especially now that concern is potentially a little more real, knowing that Chris Getz is not taking the job in Evanston. Former White Sox legend Brian Anderson getting that job as the head coach at Chicago's Big Ten baseball team. Um, but all this is going to do now is just add more online speculation about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic this winter.
Yeah, right. I just had to ask that too. That it kind of just it makes me think, and we don't know. Like I said, I wish I said it 100 times in the show. Wish I could be a fly in the wall. I'm not, but especially that quote, like you said, when he included the line about the people. You'll know more about the direction and the people making decisions going forward. That all like you said, paraphrased, but that just kind of all leads me to my mind kind of running around into a bunch of different places and what possibly could be in the cards for the front office moving forward here. All right. While we're still on trade deadline stuff, let's talk about Dylan Cease. I know you opened a little bit about him there, but your thoughts on them keeping him, not trading him, and did you really think there was a realistic shot to get what that level of control is worth? Because I didn't. That's just where I
I,
stood.
I didn't initially, but as I was sitting in my hotel in Hotlanta before heading out to the ballpark on Tuesday there, and just seeing some of the reporters, seeing Bruce Levine tweeting out things, seeing John Heyman tweeting things, and seeing, people saying that the White Sox are listening on Dylan Cease when it was just a couple of days before that, he was off limits. And then all of a sudden something changed. And when Bruce kind of got talking about it a little bit, I'm like, okay, so now we're getting locals, people that actually have day-to-day access to this team commenting on this. Maybe there is something to this right now. I still didn't necessarily think it was a high probability, but I thought, okay, maybe this is going to happen. Maybe Baltimore is really going to go for it. You know, um, they ended up, obviously taking Jack Flaherty, and once I saw that deal kind of go through, I was like, okay, I feel like that's going to put an end to any of the possibility of Dylan Cease getting moved here. And unfortunately, that is kind of what came to fruition. One of the things that you kind of have to be concerned about now with him is you saw Cease's comments, following that game on Tuesday night, and he's talking, saying like, well, they're saying the plan is to contend in 2024, and we'll see if that happens. It's not exactly painting a rosy picture for a guy's demeanor or a guy's thought process about being with this club through the rest of this year and potentially into next season. So it's almost like maybe he was thinking that something was going to happen, and he's almost like maybe a little shell shocked that in the end it didn't. And then yesterday, you see him go out there and lay another egg out there on the mound. And kind of makes you wonder, is there residual effect to him not getting moved when maybe he thought he was going to?
Yeah, that's all very interesting to me. What I and I know that people wanted to maximize return value. I totally understand that aspect of it. When you sit there, and everybody can do it. You sit there and you play armchair GM, and you go on the trade calculator, right? And you can go and mock up your own. And who knows how accurate that is? I feel some players can be overvalued on that. Some can be undervalued. It just depends. I didn't see the Orioles really pivoting from that. I mean, I feel like they were pretty happy to just give up some lower level prospects for Jack Flaherty. But what I know that this is going to be popular because it's all maximize value right now. Because he didn't get moved at the deadline doesn't mean he can't get moved this off season. Um, Say there is that shakeup and someone else is pulling the strings in the off season. The winter meetings are still going to happen in December. There's still going to be all off season of MLB Network, bringing up this kind of shit. It was all just condensed into one day there. So I'll leave it at that. That at least gives me a little solace. If there is someone else new, I'd be my preferred direction. If someone else new is pulling the strings, preferably someone brought in externally, but we all know how the White Sox operate. But either way, I didn't think it was the end of the world that Dylan Cease didn't get traded on August 1st.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't the end of the world. Again, I'm just kind of almost laser focused in my belief that he's not going to be here the next time they have a random playoff appearance. So at this juncture, there's really no point to him continuing to be around. Um, because now you just have to worry about, and we don't know this because Dylan Cease is a very almost robotic guy when he's out there in the mound and even in his post game comments. Um, he's very stoic out there. He doesn't show a lot of emotion. But is that something that now you have to be a little concerned about? Is
Yeah.
his mental state here, because maybe he did think he was going to get moved. So obviously the start yesterday was not particularly encouraging. So how he kind of follows that up now Monday when the team returns home against the Yankees, well, that'll be interesting to watch.
Right. And I'll just add to that, obviously, all of that stuff probably did play a factor in it. One, on his comments and stuff, like you said, he is always kind of stoic, but with the way that he was like, kind of discussing the future of this team. Well, when your general manager doesn't really give you a clear cut, direction and stuff like that, what more can you say? He's human, like, and he's got eyes, he's got a brain. If the Rickon says, there's a chance we can compete, and he looks around at the guys around him in the clubhouse, and how can you really be all that confident in that right now? So, I don't blame him. I actually kind of like the more genuine sort of reaction when that bled through a little bit on that front. And second of all, this has not been a new thing with Dylan Cease. He is not the same Cy Young runner-up that he was last year. It's been stretches, but he did have a good stretch throughout. Was it June? Those starts were usually pretty decent, but other than that, there have been issues elsewhere. So I'm hoping that he can get himself right, whether that be for a trade or just for gearing up for next year. Because guess what? The trade deadline is going to roll around next year too. And sure, the return wouldn't be the same exact thing as you would have gotten this year with the extra control. Just when you're shortening that, obviously that kind of brings down value a little bit that you're sending out. But like I said, it's not the end of the world. Dylan Cease can still be traded, and he can probably still land some pretty decent prospects for him. So I get it. Shooting for the moon, getting everything that you possibly can, the biggest possible haul, the best possible haul. Totally understand that front of it, but I feel like the pressure of deadline day really exacerbated a lot of people's reactions to it.
No, it 100% does. And I think that over the last 2 or 3 years since they did away with the waiver deadline, I feel like it has probably heightened that sense of anxiety a little bit more because everything has to all be done on this one day. You go back 2017, um, the cheating Astros, the franchise that now houses, hashtag trader Jose Abreu. Um, they were in the midst of a slide in July. And I remember they came here to the corner of 35th and Shields in August, and the Sox swept that team. or that was the infamous Moncada game where he, had the game tying home run and then had the walk off single. And after that, the Astros players were very vocal in their comments to the media that they felt that they needed help. And then what happens? The waiver deadline comes, and then they acquire Verlander. Teams don't have that ability to do that now. So I think there is that heightened sense of, concern that you have to get this all done right now. And I think that does play a factor in this.
Yeah. And one other thing too, just to my comments about possible trade over the winter, possible trade next trade deadline. Teams will go through the end of the season with what they have now, with the removal of that waiver deadline. How they perform in the postseason could shape how their respective front offices view what they need to do going forward. And if starting pitching is not looking too hot on the market, guess what? Now it might not seem all that bad to trade some of those highly touted prospects to get 2 years of control with Dylan Cease under the books there at a good price.
And that's a really great point, because you look at who is running the Baltimore Orioles now. Mike Elias. He was in Houston. He was the assistant GM in 2017 when all of that happened, when there was the uproar about them not making an acquisition at the deadline. And he saw the impact on that Justin Verlander made on that cheating squad that ultimately got their World Series. So if the Orioles, who right now have the best record in the American League, if they fall short in the playoffs because they had a pitching deficiency, that could change his trade strategy and how he approaches this upcoming winter. So I think that's a really good point.
It's their first go around in this window, whether they express it or not. Just get the gist that they're in a little bit of prospect hoarding mode. Well, we've made it this far with the guys that we've had come up through our system and built organically. So what's to make us think that we can't? Well, an early playoff exit might do that. Might do that to you.
And you also play in the AL East. So it's kind of one of those things where I look at it as you really need to treat every playoff appearance sacred. That's something that gets talked about a lot. Lawyer Boy has used that term quite a bit. I think especially being in that division, you really need to treat every opportunity to get to and potentially win a World Series like it could be the last one, because that division is such a gauntlet and it can turn around really quick. So this is going to be fascinating to watch the Orioles in particular. And, will they ultimately regret not pulling the trigger on Dylan Cease come, you know, mid-October? Well, we're going to have to wait and see on that. Instead, they settled for Jack Flaherty, who, maybe he's the guy that takes Lucas Giolito's spot in the rotation next year, since they had the same high school pitching coach, assuming Ethan Katz is still here next year.
Yeah, I have seen those comments a little bit. That's future White Sox Jack Flaherty. He had a good outing. Give him credit. He had a good outing in his first go around with Baltimore. So we'll see what that brings. I guess my last question: will the White Sox have a direction by that mid-October time, or are we going to have to wait and see how the rest of the league plays out first?
I mean, I think the direction is probably the one of the downward pointing arrow outside the stadium.
Yeah, damn. You know what? It's funny. I have a Fly the Arrow shirt that White Sox sold way back in the day, back in like 2017. I wish I wore it tonight so I could hold it up right now.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, last thing on trade deadline, guys coming back. Just get a little bit of reaction on some of the returns that the White Sox got. Anyone stand out to you? Anyone you like in particular? Anything make you scratch your head? Stuff like that. Go ahead. Chime in on the returns.
I think all the returns were kind of in line with what I was anticipating. I know obviously Edgar Caro is a guy that is a top 100 prospect right now and fits a need as far as, being a catcher. And then obviously getting Corey Lee from Houston, another catcher there. So the fact that they recognize that they have a catching problem that they need to address here at the end of this season and into 2024, I guess I'll say that that's a positive that they realize that. Will either one of these guys be the answer? Who knows? I saw on Fangraphs on one of their scouting reports of the left-handed pitcher that they got from the Marlins for Jake Berger, and the little snippet said could potentially be a left-handed Spencer Strider, which, look, that would be awesome. If that panned out, I got to watch Spencer Strider pitch in person on Tuesday, and let me tell you, that stuff is pretty wild. It was fascinating to see that. You think about the rich pitching history of the Barbs organization, particularly over the course of the last 30 years. Tuesday, Spencer Strider became the quickest pitcher to record 200 strikeouts in a season in Barb's history. Did it like 112 innings. I mean, that's just crazy to think about. So if that's the type of guy that you can get back, that would help to lessen the sting of losing Jake Berger. But my overarching point with all of these moves that have been made here, we lived through seeing what some publications deem the top farm system in baseball, and it yielded 2 singular playoff wins. I can't bring myself to getting overly excited about any of the guys that have come back to this point. I'm, going to loosely monitor their progress here through the system. I'm not going back to what I was doing in 2017 and 2018, watching, more minor league games than major league games. I just can't do it again, knowing that it's the same scouting and development people that are in charge. So the burden of proof is on them to show that they learned from their mistakes the first 2 times they tried to do this. And I'm just not confident in it. I'm hoping for the best. I tweeted this earlier. All I want is for Colson Montgomery to actually be good. That would just be so nice. But until I see it happen, until I see guys come up to the corner of 35th and Shields and produce wearing a White Sox uniform, not wearing a Birmingham Barons uniform or a Charlotte Knights uniform or a Winston-Salem's Dash uniform, I'm just not going to be that excited.
Right. I'm in that same boat with you. And if you go and follow me on the old X machine, Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days, I've been pretty hard on the prospects there. But that's because, like, all those reasons that you just listed out. We've been here before. We've seen this. We've seen one of the top systems so far produce exactly what you said, 2 singular playoff wins, and not a lot of that sustained success. That was a buzzword thrown around at the beginning of Rebuild 2.0. So I'm with you in the camp of don't get your hopes up and all of that. But I will say, you know what? I'll admit it too. I'll give them kudos when it's due. Hey, Colson Montgomery got on base 6 times in one game, 6 plate appearances, 6 times on base. That's pretty good. And he is just fresh up to Double-A. So, looking at stuff like that, that's encouraging. But once again, need to see it happen in a White Sox uniform. So I'm with you on that.
You talk about sustained success, and this is something I tweeted when I got out to Truist Park on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
I took a picture of the light poles that are in right field at the ballpark that houses all of the flags for division winners, pennants, and World Series in Barb's history. They have, that's what sustained success looks like. This team, that Braves organization, since 1991, there have only been 9 seasons that they haven't made the playoffs since 1991. That is what you call sustained success. The White Sox have 1 more postseason appearance in their entire franchise history, spanning back to the year of our Lord, 1903.
Yeah.
It's just depressing.
Those are some rough facts only to digest. One comment that I had on that, you explained the premise of that pretty well. I'm talking about the physical look of that, because those are still on the light poles in a great spot. Everyone can see them. You were able to take a nice picture of them there. Hey, remember when the Sox still had that? I know there's not nearly as many to display, but it was cool when those were on the light poles and pretty visible wherever you were in the park. But now we've moved them to little tiny, miniature metal looking pennants that are over on the brick pillars to the fundamentals deck in left field. So unless you're sitting down there, not even the bleachers, in those left field seats that are in the corner right above the bullpen, you're not really seeing any of that. So that's my gripe when I saw that there. Oh, that's cool that the Braves have them there. wish the White Sox still did in our ballpark.
Yeah, it's almost like maybe the Sox organization is that embarrassed by the lack of pennants that they have up, but then again, they really only have themselves to blame for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling on that, but it's not like they've replaced those with like massive ads in
Yeah.
there, which I would be still pissed off about, but understand if you're generating some revenue and that's why the move was for. I don't even know why. All that shit's just blank there on those foul poles. It's just quite literally the poles that are there. So that's less kind of lighthearted thought to leave on here. All right, that's about it for this edition of Sox on Tap After Dark. We appreciate everyone staying up, burning the midnight oil with us. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back with Sunday Fun Day, so make sure you're subscribed on YouTube on Tap Sportsnet so you don't miss it. Go and check us out on tapsportsnet.com and give us a follow on social media at Sox on Tap and at On Tap Sportsnet. I'll do it. Until next time, White Sox forever.